Hi, those that have joined us for this webinar. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes to let people join. So we'll sit here in awkward silence whilst we wait for them. But then we will get the session started. So just bear with us for a couple of minutes just to let those people log in, do so. Hi, those that have joined and are listening to the silence. I just am letting a few people into the webinar, so we're just going to get started in about a minute's time. So thanks for bearing with us, and then we'll get started. Okay. I think that will do. We will begin the webinar today. So I'm super excited to host this webinar with three wonderful colleagues we work together for a fair while now and know each other from the sector. But it's been lovely presenting alongside these three wonderful women. Over the last year, we've been presenting together at a few different conferences. And so we wanted to share with a broader community some of the insights that we have across the transfer community, particularly looking at the US for this webinar. So I'm going to introduce, so my name is Kate Barnes and I'm the Executive Director for Acumen, and we support universities with their internationalization strategies. And in particular, we help to support universities in North America to recruit more students to go outbound from the US. So Katie, I'll pass over to you next, and then we'll pass on to Emma and Ashley for introductions.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. I am Katie Landry, our Director of Partner Success here at Acumen, and I support our institutional partnerships that are with us recruiting out of the US and more broadly across the Americas. And I will pass it over to Emma.
Thank you, Kate and Katie. Very happy to be here today. My name is Emma Schwartz-Lara, and I have my better half here, one of the co-founders of the Transfer Abroad Network, and really amazing to see so many familiar names and faces, and just thrilled to continue the conversation. I'll pass it off to Ashley.
And hey, everybody, I'm Ashley Warmington, the other half of the Transfer Abroad Network. And again, just really happy to be here and see so many interested in community colleges.
Wonderful, thank you. So I can already see there's a message in the chat mentioning that there's an echo. So if anyone else is getting that echo, please just type in. If not, hopefully it's been resolved for that individual. Maybe signing out and coming back in might help. But you have prompted us to put questions in the chat, so please do so. We want this to be a really interactive session. So any questions you have around transfer students, around the community college network, around outbound mobility from the US, please put any questions you want into the chat. We'd be more than happy to answer them as we go along, but also I'll leave time at the end for any questions. Okay, Emma, Katie, Ashley, over to you.
All right. Katie, would you like to start us off for Acumen?
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet because I see
Okay.
lots of familiar names in the chat. But like I mentioned, we are a global service provider supporting universities in their internationalization strategy. My role in particular, and where Kate supports us broadly in the work that she does, is supporting our university partners across North America. We have a large consortia of in-country representatives placed across the US, typically recruiting on behalf of our university partners, but we have others that are focused on partnership development, philanthropy, athletics development as well. well. And so we're really excited to be sitting here alongside the Transfer Abroad Network because outbound mobility is in the work that we do every single day. And we've had some great conversation with both Emma and Ashley as they've launched Transfer Abroad Network about how to continue to put this opportunity in front of community college students, especially as the interest in starting off the university experience at a community college continues to grow across the US.
Perfect. And I'll give a brief summary of the Transfer Abroad Network. So Emma and I created the Transfer Abroad Network. Essentially, it's a platform that brings together international universities with community colleges from across the United States to all serve community college students. And make it easier for that processing. So when students are applying through the Transfer Abroad Network, universities have an easier time reviewing and admitting these students and evaluating their credits, but also it acts as a one-stop shop and resource hub for these students as well to find out where in the world they can take their credits with them.
So let's talk about the three users. The transfer student historically has been lost in translation when it comes to international recruitment. It is such a well-oiled machine here in the United States. The US community college student, it is interested in pursuing bachelor's degrees abroad, but we want to make it clear and very streamlined for the student to understand where they can go. So the three users that work together, because we're all there to serve the student. This is why we've come into the industry. Ashley and I have really made this with the student in mind, that we all work together to serve the student. When they're on campus, they'll have their community college on board and understand the community college is internationalized. They're wanting students to go abroad. So we've brought to our platform community colleges, advisors, transfer offices that guide students and have a real heart for giving them alternate options aside from those well-oiled paths in the United States. And then we have the International University that really foresees the vision that there are millions of students in the United States that are extremely talented coming from community college. They've often been overlooked. We have so many international universities behind us. I think everyone does believe in this vision, and they're all helping the student understand what they can do. At the end of the day, this is all about transparency for students to know exactly where they stand. Maybe you're only crediting 1 year, maybe it's a half a year, at least they know where they stand. And the benefits of international transfer is, there's so many, like the student often has lower price points. This is really sensitive nowadays in the United States, where now there's dozens of schools that are above 90K in the United States. So this is just a really good option for them. And a lot of students choose to go to community college because they want to go to UCLA, they want to go to USC, but it's so impacted and the acceptance rates are below 6%. And then university, sustainable US pipelines, you have access to high retention students. Typically, students fall off if they're first-time freshmen, about 69% to continue on to second year. It's upwards of 85% if you're a transfer student on staying at the institution. And then community colleges really have stronger advising outcomes. They're really one-on-one with the student. Not only are the advisors one-on-one, but the professors. You have some of the most down-to-earth, wonderful people wanting to guide these students in the direction that they want to go in.
I've had a look through our participant names, and I know many of you will be familiar with how US student recruitment differs from other markets that the university might be focused in. But for those that might be newer to the US market, we just wanted to highlight a few ways that this market is going to look quite different, especially across other high-profile markets such as India, China, and Nigeria. And so the first is program length. Undergraduate programs in the US are on average 4 years, and it depends on the sector, but in many other markets, these might be shorter program lengths. But what this means is that for universities that can transfer students into a third-year program, they expect to do 2 more years anyway in the US. So even if they can only come in at year 2 for a university that has a 3-year undergraduate degree, this really does align with the US expectation that community college students would have. We also wanted to note that test optional policies are quite widespread in the US. So for the fall 2026 intake, over 90% of US universities did not require the SAT or ACT for their admissions processes. That said, more Ivy League and some of our top-rated public institutions across the US are revisiting their test policies as they continue to revamp admissions policies under the new administration. The US is not an agent market, so relationships are built directly with high school counselors, colleges, universities to drive student recruitment, which Ashley and Emma will both touch on, is how they help build those relationships directly with the community college because there aren't agents in the market to do so. It is a high touch domestic admissions process as well. So students expect responsiveness from the universities that they're applying to, and they expect that admissions representatives or admissions counselors are going to be in frequent communication with them throughout the entire process from prospect to enrollment. Finally, at eligible universities, students can use their federal funding abroad. And so while this isn't typically or traditionally an outbound market, we are, and we'll get into some of the student sentiment data in a little bit, we are seeing this trend change. And so while the US may not be sending similar numbers to other destinations, it's a great market for universities to focus on that are trying to diversify their international student portfolio. I'll pass it back to Emma and Ashley to talk about why students are looking abroad from the conversations they're having on the ground right now with community college students. But we'll kind of pass this one back and forth as we chat about these reasons.
Yeah, I think we all kind of know that the landscape in admissions in the US is just kind of difficult for these students. There's so many different factors that they're having to take into consideration. From the US tuition, on average, has risen 26%, all the way up to 219% at private universities. Cost is going to be a major factor, and not just from the less economically mobile student. All students are taking this into serious consideration when they're thinking about their educational journey. Also, access to world-class programs. Some students are obviously, some are already looking because they have word of mouth or however they stumble across this idea of going abroad for their full degree. But now students are starting to look at the global stage in terms of education. The world is becoming smaller with social media and all of these amazing options that are available to them around the world. They're starting to see that they are accessible and they can study at world-class university and actually pay less in many cases as well, or even complete it quicker. So that faster graduation thing is, again, a concept that is attracting students and drawing students to this idea of going abroad for their full degree pathway. But also, the AP process is not, as you know, available at every single high school across the United States. Actually, over 40% of high schools don't offer the AP in the US, whereas community college achievement is the credential that can open these international doors because around 90% of high schools offer dual enrollment. So if you're looking for AP requirements from these students or SAT requirements, you might be closing a door in the face of students who would be wonderful at your institution. Whereas if you also, in addition to those, have the option for students to apply with community college credits or even an associate's degree, even if you're admitting into first year entry and being very transparent about that, even allowing the option to have students apply with community college credits is opening yourself up to all students in the US, no matter what their background, no matter what their age or their educational pathway, because community colleges are built to be accessible. They are there for the community. And also the global career edge. People are looking for angles to be competitive in a job market or in a career, or going where the research is world renowned for your institution, or thinking about the experiences that will make them stronger as an individual and future employee or person in their career path. So again, all of these things mixed in with cultural and personal growth, everything that you already know, but because in addition to the landscape that Katie was describing earlier, it's all coming to a head. And now's the time for these students in the US to really think very seriously about options outside of the US.
Thanks, Ashley. Alongside some of the market trends we're seeing, Acumen's also been tracking the changing student sentiment in the market and especially focusing on how the 2024 election and subsequent change in administration has impacted student mobility trends out of the US. So this data is collected through various social channels, and while we're going to share briefly the market findings here, the full data is covered in extensive detail in our US outbound student mobility report, which we will share at the end as a resource for those that might want to do a deeper dive into some of the sentiment. So, the first thing I want to highlight is that the student voice mentions that were related to international education or interest in going into international education opportunities doubled in volume from pre-election to post-election period. And this was a result in increased responses to actions that were done by the Trump administration and oftentimes actions that directly related to academia across the US. So this is important to note before we get into the next few slides, because you may see that while the percentage of voices or the percentage of posts that were related to certain functions, so related to sadness or fear, which you'll see in the next slide, may stay similar, it's the volume of these posts that increase so substantially. The other thing I want to note here is in 2024, when we initially started talking about this data and this increase in response, there was really the expectation that we were going to see a spike and it was going to drop back down. Historically, that's what we saw out of the US is we might see a month or two of students sharing sentiment, saying they wanted to leave the US, but this is really the first time that we've seen this response stay sustained. And now we're getting into a 2-year period where students are continuing to seek external opportunities. And this voice and this sentiment is staying relevant in the market. So this is something we just want to note, and we'll get into a bit of the data on because it's a difference and it's something new we're seeing out of the States. And it's a really good time for universities to capitalize on this sentiment change. So, as I mentioned, while we are seeing an increase in the posts, you might not see such a difference in the percentage of posts. So, the first comparative analysis is the sentiment in online social coverage. And you'll see, while it's only slightly more negative, again, because there were significantly more posts in this time, there are much more negative posts coming out of the US market from students. And similarly, on the bottom left there, you'll see the emotional volume in online social coverage. And again, we're seeing that sadness, anger are really taking over the sentiment we're seeing from students as they talk about their options internally and domestically versus their options externally. So before the election, negative mentions typically fell into 3 broad themes. We were seeing students talk about financial constraints, which might prevent their pursuit of college altogether, but especially abroad, comparing the value of a degree from within the US and without, and then navigating the rules surrounding international study. So those were the 3 themes we saw before. But post-election, we're seeing that negative mentions are more thematically focused around fears of increasingly authoritarian political landscape, and reevaluating their options for education and research. Those that are doing recruitment or working closely with the US market know that there have been a lot of funding changes that have impacted the ability for both faculty members, but also especially postgraduate students to access research funding. And so we're hearing that there's more concern around brain drain from the US as well. So while the negative mentions have gone up slightly in terms of percentage, we are seeing that the themes are changing pretty significantly from pre-election to post-election. And then finally, we'll go, Emma, if you can just, thank you, one more slide. I just want to share how the mentions vary by topic pre and post election. And you'll see this quite clearly on this graph. But before, cost was typically the top mention for a push factor for US outbound conversation. But now we're seeing that political climate has gone up substantially and has overtaken cost as a dominant factor. We'll talk about this a bit more as we continue the presentation, but when we're drilling into the political climate, we tend to see that there's this desire to escape America that's often voiced in these posts, and users are citing that they want to leave persistent polarization, institutional volatility, and notice that conditions have worsened in their lifetime and they're looking for opportunities to pursue a degree abroad because they might be interested in understanding what it's like to live in a different country. So a lot of the challenges students are facing domestically, we're seeing as great pull factors to the universities that we represent and universities generally globally. What I'll note just to sum up our conversation about sentiment is that this matters for our global destinations because right now we're seeing that push factors really outweigh the pull factors when it comes to the sentiment data from students across the US. Students aren't typically mentioning a destination specifically, and certainly it's even more rare to see students mentioning a university specifically while we look into the sentiment data. It tends to be more about what is making them want to leave the country. And so universities that can position themselves and make sure they're responding to those concerns, those fears, and showing stability is really important. One of the things I want to note here, and I think this is especially important for our universities that are investing and really thinking about how they can recruit from the US sustainably, is the perception of stability actually outranks policy details. So students want to hear that other students feel comfortable at the university, comfortable on campus, and are having a positive experience, regardless of what the policy in a country is. And so I know Ashley and Emma will get into some of why the student ambassador voice matters and why having these relationships across the US matters, but I do want to highlight that we're also seeing that echoed in the student sentiment data as well, is that the perception is the most important piece for students in their search for international destinations. All right, I will pass it back over to Emma/Ashley as they pick up a little bit more specifically about the community college landscape.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. So the shifting landscape in the United States, it's really historically been community colleges have been extremely popular. I mean, I went to community college over a decade ago. It's been accessible. It's been a source of incredible educational system. We actually overheard one of the directors of a community college, a leadership of a community college said it's one of the best things the U.S. does right. We give accessible free education at a high level, a very these institutions have faculty that have PhDs. It is a great education. And for the first time ever, you're seeing more young people undertake this option to go to community college. So the 18 to 20-year-olds are now the largest group of earning first-time associate degrees. What that means is they have a new pathway. Kind of this is what their friends are doing. This is the norm now for 18 to 20-year-olds. You have places like Laguna Beach High School, where over 35% of their students go to community college. Huntington Beach High School, 50% of their students go to community college right out of high school. And 1/3 of learners, all first-time associate degree learners from 2024 to 2025 were aged 18 to 20, and associate's degrees awarded in 25. You have an increase. It's one of the only places in higher education in the United States where you do see an increase of students. You see an increase of associate's degree awarded. So this is clearly a growing market, and it's always been here. And hopefully, Ashley and we're really doing our best to open up the market and really show you that these students are talented, they're ready to go abroad, and they have a great degree behind them.
Thank you, Emma. And as mentioned before, I mean, community college is accessible. It's also a fraction of the cost of regular universities in the US, both public and private. And at times, community college can even be free for certain populations of students. So, depending on where students are coming from, what states they're studying in, they can actually attend community college completely free of charge. And even if they are paying towards that tuition for community college, it's still a very low fee in comparison to what they would be paying if they went directly into a four-year university. What's really cool for the international universities looking at these students and their readiness is that the community college experience as a learner is much different to what you would have at a four-year institution. The classes are kind of aligned with what you have at international universities. They're smaller. You have more contact points with the actual academics. And as Emma mentioned, with the quality of the faculty, working in the sector for so long, we've met many faculty members who teach at four-year institutions in addition to community college, because what you find when you're speaking with these academics is they enjoy working at community colleges because they get to design their curriculum and have more freedom and flexibility to really lead that. So what you end up having is faculty members who teach at Stanford are also teaching at De Anza. And so there's just some really great quality learning happening at these community colleges that I think is sometimes overlooked by international universities or not recognized as much. These students also have a lot of flexibility to explore. So once they sign up for an associate's degree, they are taking components of different classes as a requirement in addition to their major related coursework, but they can easily change and just stack up more credits to change their major. So again, from an international university standpoint, when you're working with these students, if they don't have enough major related coursework in order to transfer into advanced entry, it's not beyond reason for you to say, hey, but take more because it's accessible, it's low cost, and they can change very easily. So it's very flexible, and you can work with these students. It's much less rigid. And also, when students are attending community colleges, there's around just under 10 million community college students enrolled across the United States. 8 in 10 of those intend to transfer to complete their bachelor's degree. So what that means is many community colleges have set transfer dedicated pathways for their associate's degrees, and students go into that experience knowing that they want to find a bachelor's degree. So not only do you get to contact these students for the first time ever, but you also might connect with them again if you missed them at that high school point and they've then done their associates and you've gotten to that second decision point. You can actually have another go at trying to connect with these students and recruit them.
So we've kind of already touched on this, but it's a huge pool of students taught by world-class faculty. Community colleges really do combine massive enrollment with credentialed instructors. What we mean by that is the community colleges around California have 28,000 plus students. You're looking at the same type of population that you would find at a four-year institution. These are really large public institutions in the United States. And 70% again do hold a master's degree or higher. We're talking about PhD professors, and 1 in 5 ultimately, of course, have a doctorate. So these are high quality teaching facilities and produce amazing students.
Yeah, and again, why this might set you up for success abroad as a student. So when you have so many students attending at these community colleges, there's such a diverse pool of students. So there's no one profile of a community college students. There's 30 plus thousand students on these campuses. So it really opens you up to more diversity and more scale with your recruitment because oftentimes if you're trying to connect overseas, you're either doing it virtually or you're visiting high schools. And which high schools are you going to? You're going to the ones that you always go to because you're traditionally getting students and you've built up relationships. And so going to community colleges might feel like a blank slate that can be costly in terms of your resources, but it can also help you to tap into a much more diverse and broad pool of students who are coming from so many different backgrounds that might unlock your recruitment as well. But when you're working with these community colleges, their coursework and their credentials match what you would expect for the faculty members that are teaching on campus as well. They have really niche, deep expertise as well, and these students are ready to thrive overseas. They know what they want. They have already committed. Oftentimes, you'll find that the students who are studying at community college are much more decisive in their process. So there's data from the Common App that suggests that the average student who's applying for first year entry will submit up to 20 applications. And the conversion on that is really unpredictable for universities to actually get them enrolled on campus, especially as an international university, if you're competing with these options where they're also applying to domestic schools. But if a student is applying to transfer, the data suggests that the student is only submitting 2 applications. So if a student is applying to you as a transfer student, they mean it. And they are actually looking at your program specifically, and you're much more likely to convert these students. So even though, again, if this is a newer market for you, it can be a very high value market because once you connect with that student and once you create those faculty pathways as well, they are ready to thrive and they're ready to make that decision and actually convert to an enrolled student on your campus.
So So we're really proud to show just after 6 months of real, this recruitment season, spring semester, we have students from 105 different community colleges, which is 10% of all community colleges from 33 states. So you have all across the map. We're so excited to see, Fairbanks Community College in Alaska. We have Kalamazoo. You have all these different types of community colleges offering the same degree. So, what we want to emphasize in this webinar is that an associate's degree is 60 units, which is 2 years of full-time study. So these students, no matter where they are in the country, they have the same accreditation, which is the community college accreditation that they have to hold in order to get an associate's degree. So you've got all of the, you'll see so many names here, just a select few of our community colleges, but they're coming with that 60 units if you are requiring an associate's degree. And we're really, again, proud to show you just how far we've come in just a short few months. And where these students are going to go it's really endless. And we're excited to see the growth year on year.
What we're seeing is being as helpful for international universities and community colleges that is making this engine really run is that the ability to track these international applications and connect with students that they are difficult to all get into one space at one time. So having a central place and information that is transparent is very helpful. So it's just about that transparency and connecting with these students, but also the advisors. So if you're working closely with community colleges, actually tapping into those who are actually working directly with these students is a huge plus for your university for connecting with these institutions. And these international offices are going to be guiding the students towards which options are viable for them. And then the other thing that is obviously going to work well is faculty to faculty connection. So if you have a program such as marine biology that performs very well, start there, because if you have those strengths, then just go where the strengths are and the students are going to come for that program. So those are the different things that we're seeing work well just from the platform use. But again, it's about working together and just really giving that transparency to students so they understand what the process is.
Katie, feel free to chime in anytime. I feel like we've really had a few slides here. This is the most recent data for fall 2025 entry. Just reiterating the fact that community colleges are a source of a huge amount of admissions and students who are going to top-ranked university. UC Berkeley every year admits near almost 6,000 students for transfer. So that is an enormous number. And this begs the question, they have a dedicated transfer admission specialist. When I was first applying to US universities right out of college, transfer advisors and transfer admissions was one of the biggest roles out there. So it is a well-oiled machine. This really shows you that UCLA has 6,400 admits for 2025, fall 2025, which makes up about 33% of their undergraduate population coming from the community college level. So if there's any question in quality, any question in rigor, hopefully this really shows you that thousands of students are being admitted. You have almost 1,000 students, well, 670 going to Cornell, which is an Ivy League. This is just a small pullout of data. You do have transfer students at Stanford getting 2 years of credit. So this, again, just is that snapshot of quality universities in the United States. About 88% have a transfer specialist or some sort of transfer pipeline. They have extra support for transfer students. And we're really just trying to normalize this abroad. Obviously, Ashley and I are here to support the transfer student, but having everyone work together, like our first slide, is the most important thing, especially if you're, admitting 1,000 students through transfer.
And really, the point that we're trying to make here is that this is a well-used pathway in the US education landscape. Universities domestically here in the US have transfer policies. They have transfer teams, and they work closely with community colleges. And right now, there's not that same level of presence for international universities. So it's a huge blank space for millions of students that you're not currently accessing. And the only options these students are currently being given are these well-paved pathways into domestic universities. So there are some challenges for the community college side when you are kind of coming in from that international university recruitment angle. The community college advisor, obviously they want to help. There is just so many amazing teams at these community colleges, but they have small offices. They're serving thousands of students. It is a brand new concept. And when you take into consideration that oftentimes when you're entering these conversations, you begin the conversation with saying, like, let's do the hardest part first and map everything and then see if there's interest, because you do have to go course by course at the moment. It's really difficult for credit evaluation without that platform support. So it can be a newer concept for faculty, and it can be slow to feel the results and the benefits of coming to the market and trying to connect with community colleges, because there's so many easy, streamlined pathways for their students. You might find a hesitance to learn something new and to try to disseminate that information amongst their thousands of students with thousands of various needs. Because again, very diverse student bodies. Everybody's on their own timeline at community college. Everybody's going on their own pathway. So it's much more difficult to connect with them if you're trying to come in very, very bespoke and tailored before connecting first with the audience. So it's really just about those barriers and taking into consideration that it's hard for them too. You want their students and they want these opportunities for their students. We all want the same thing. We all want to help the students and act as a bridge. So again, it's about understanding that if you want to truly connect with this market, you have to be responsive to what the market needs and understand that there are so many streamlined systems in place. So if you're making it hard for them, it can go slower.
Ashley and Emma both touched on this, but setting up transfer pathways can be an incredibly nuanced process. And so, while this certainly is not a comprehensive list, it does and was built in order to help partners that might be in institutions that might be new to developing these partnerships, to start to think about what are some of the considerations they should make before exploring building these transfer pipelines and pathways. Ashley and Emma are going to dive into some examples. I know Kate has some questions for them on previous partnerships they've seen work well, so I won't get into the weeds of all of this, but a couple of things on here that I want to highlight. The first is strategic alignment. I know Ashley mentioned this briefly, but for faculties or for universities that may just want to dip in their toe in the water and kind of start to see what's working, or if you know there's one faculty that might be really involved, but we're not ready to get the entire university on board, mapping that program to program transfer has worked really well in the past. And oftentimes we see that as one program really starts to take off, it's easier to get faculty buy-in more broadly. Academic readiness, I know we've chatted about. This is a concern that's been voiced many times, and we've all heard that are students ready to transfer abroad, and are community college students at the caliber of the universities that are recruiting out of the US? We are seeing more and more US students choosing community college given costs in states. And so as a result, we're also seeing that the students going to community college are of higher caliber and higher academic profiles than maybe historically, even more so because they already were successful, but more and more students are choosing to go down that pathway. So again, I know Ashley and Emma have talked about this, but there is a lot of data that suggests that they come out with really strong outcomes. And so that's data that we can share across all of our panelists here on this session. I've dropped our info in the chat to help advocate for why these pipelines matter. Student finance, I also wanted to pause and touch on that for universities that can be really transparent about their costs and access to scholarship. It matters in the US. I think there's a really common misconception that the US is not a scholarship dependent market, given its economic success compared to certain other markets that a university might be recruiting out of. But it is incredibly scholarship dependent. And there's a sensitivity to this because a lot of US institutions rely heavily on scholarship, but also rely heavily on tuition discounting. And oftentimes, a student's perception is that if a university is not offering scholarship, they don't want the student as much as a university that is, even if the university that is offering scholarship is more expensive. And so it's something we note to say that that can be a misconception around this market. And so being really clear about scholarship opportunities and the cost is going to be really important for the student experience. And lastly, I just want to touch on the quality and outcomes. We, especially on the graduate conversation of recruitment, hear often it's hard to compete with a domestic university because they want those students too. And what I think is really beautiful about the relationship with community colleges is community colleges can recruit students more effectively if they can boast better outcomes for their students after their 2 years. So it actually benefits the community college for students to continue their degree and go on to complete, at the very least, a bachelor's degree. So they are tracking their employment outcomes, they are tracking their degree outcomes of those graduates so that they can use it to recruit more effectively. So this really is a unique win-win situation for the relationship between the community colleges and the universities that students are going on to transfer to hopefully complete that full bachelor's degree. And so when we talk about outcomes, that's a unique position to be in where you might be able to build a pipeline with a university that's actually pushing their students or community colleges pushing their students into this pipeline because it benefits them as much as it benefits the university receiving that student.
One thing I'll just add in here, Katie, if you don't mind, is just around many universities have already developed partnerships and a form of a transfer partnership in regards to locations like China. So there'll be articulation arrangements that are already in place. So there's already established routes around certain subject areas that already have a lot of this kind of checklist that we've put here will already be in place within many of the universities that are on the call today. So often I would advise look at some of those subjects that maybe one of your colleagues who's working more with China or working in other regions already have established partnerships that come in as a transfer route. It might just be termed something different. So it's a good way to kind of identify faculty who already have a willingness to explore this later year entry point and also have already mapped a lot of this process. So that's one kind of piece of advice I would give is look at where you already have established partnerships in other regions and see if there's an element that you can map to working with transfer colleges, students in the US. Emma, Ashley, sorry, I know over to you both, I think, for the final slide, and then we'll take some questions. So please pop some in the chat.
So I think that our practical tips to navigate the market successfully would just to be to ensure that the students have clear guidance. We're all about transparency. If it is case by case evaluation, if it is, first year entry, how are the US credits going to transfer? Because if anything, you'll just unlock a new population to reach out to. Ashley and I have been on the ground, admissions and recruitment officers for many years, and we've found that not only community college students and advisors are really open to these opportunities, but it just is a brand new market for a lot of people. And then streamlining the application process, I think that's a big one. Ashley and I both have historically worked for institutions abroad that we want transfer students. We've created articulation agreements, but the application process was too clunky for the student and they would fall off just because of the, again and again, you heard throughout the presentation, there are well-oiled paths here. So if they have that trouble of reaching out and going through country systems that are catered to the first year or domestic student, then it's discouraging. As a transfer student myself, I know that that really would have discouraged me and I would have gone where the door is open. And what we're trying to do with Transfer Abroad Network and in partnership with Kate and Katie is open the door and at least give them the option, and make it as smooth as possible. We know that this is still a learning experience with us and our partners. We want to work together, but at least we are trying and working together with the colleges and with the student. And of course, providing communication, sending offers, and clear guidelines through the transfer process. We have most of our institutions are creating transfer policies. They're really looking at working with their admissions offices. Recruitment and admissions are working really closely together, and faculty. So this is really bringing institutions together like, maybe never before for the United States. So we're really looking forward to continuing this work and just better demystifying the process for transfer students. Do you have anything to add, Ashley? Just, I mean,
That was perfect.
Wonderful. I think this is the final slide for anybody that wants to download the report that Katie referenced earlier. Feel free to do so here. What I'm going to do is open up to questions now, and I've got one initially that I want to ask, which is around Emma and Ashley in particular. Could you help to give us maybe an example of this in practice? Because I think it sounds brilliant, and I know that you've got a lot of success stories that you can share. So maybe could you share like one or two examples from your experience of working with different universities and with the community colleges and the students that kind of bring this to life?
Yeah, well, one that is very recent that we've seen is there is an institution who recently signed up after about a year of conversation with the various faculty members just to get them on board for advanced level entry. And this was a Scottish university, so they were really looking at that 2+2 pathway. They found some open doors internally with the faculty members, but others were a little bit more hesitant about that process. They came onto the Transfer Abroad network and within 2 weeks had an application from a student who was ready to transfer, fully qualified, 4.0 great GPA. And so, speaking with that university as a follow-up call, they were saying that that's been very helpful in terms of the faculty that were super excited about it. They're really pleased to see that application come through so quickly, but also the faculty members that were maybe unsure about whether it was, the juice was going to be worth the squeeze with the effort of coming on and doing advanced level entry. To see it so immediately, I think is helping them to sort of open their minds a little bit more and for the faculty members to open up. So that was a great example. But Emma, I know you have some wonderful ones of students on campus too.
Well, most recently, Ashley and I accompanied 26 transfer going students to Switzerland, where this Swiss university has created a 2+1 pathway where they can finish in 1 year. And you have so much interest for that program because they've really streamlined the process. They're able to pack that 1 year with all of their content, as long as the 2 year degree is in a specific subject. So you see so much interest there. 5 different community colleges represented across the United States with those 26 students. So, and quite a few starting in the fall. So we're really excited to see that, truly in practice, that true interest in students that maybe have never been abroad before, just really spreading their wings, which has been amazing. We also have had one student go to the UK to visit a campus. So actually, she reached out to us that she loved the campus. She's going to be transferring next fall. So students are finding us. We had a meeting with a student that found us on Google search, and the institution really made it work because she had a degree in a related field. So what we've seen, and most recently, obviously, with my role at James Cook University, you had that more blanket policy being in place with the Associates of Science in a related field, where a student could really have that and then go to campus. And you see, dozens of transfer students now applying and actually going to campus. So that, I think, this is a common theme of making it as smooth a transfer process as possible, kind of mapping out on a grander scale, or just really being quick with that case by case evaluation. So yeah, it's very exciting to see.
Brilliant, thank you. And have you, I guess for all three of you, what sort of lessons have you learned from kind of students who you've been in contact with from community colleges, in regards to what types of inquiries do they have? What are they looking for? Where do they need the most support? So what type of inquiries and support do they need?
I think the main thing has been transparency, and that's what, we have hundreds of students. We're so lucky on the platform so far, and really having the section where we have all the scholarship information. We've had universities market their scholarships as transfer student scholarships. So maybe historically they've offered, scholarships, but now they're transfer student scholarships. It's all about, again, valuing where the student is coming from. So I think that's been the biggest, where they're like, oh my gosh, I can, get 10,000 pounds off my education. Plus the cost of living is a fraction of staying in California or et cetera, wherever they are in the country. So I think cost has been a big one, but we demystified that through the platform. Does our institution offer federal aid? We had the Veterans Benefits individual who works with international schools actually reach out to Ashley and I. And say we really value that you've indicated that if you. Have the GI Bill. So I think just again spreading the word about that.
Thanks, Emma. Appreciate that.
One of the things I'll just add to that quickly and note is what we've seen across undergraduate application concerns is there's been an increased concern from students applying first year for full time around filling out an application. And I think that aligns with what Emma and Ashley talked about earlier, that removing barriers is so important right now for the wider conversations we're having with students generally about applying to a university, whether it be straight to community college, straight to a university, is they're finding it really nuanced. They're finding it hard. And for those of you that have experience working with US universities, you know it can be quite an opaque process for students. It's not as black and white as many of our international university partners who are posting clear test scores and clear GPA requirements. And so being able to articulate for students how the application process is different is really helpful. We find that students that have a bit of that hand-holding in the beginning actually really enjoy the international application process because compared to US universities, it's oftentimes seen as being a lot more seamless. But I think there is that common misconception that if the US process is this hard, it must be even harder to apply abroad. So I think that's just something to keep in the back of our minds is it can be as simple as just helping students understand how the process looks different from what they might be used to domestically.
Thanks, Katie. Important
I'll
point there.
actually, I'll add to that in terms of the differences. The US admissions and recruitment person is the same person. So when I went to fairs as a domestic recruiter in California, I made the offers, I knew the student. It was very quick with the admissions process. So yes, it's a bit harder if you do go to a more competitive university where it's a lottery system. But at the end of the day, admissions and recruitment is one. You see that a lot with American University abroad, that they're admitting people faster. They are the ones that are reviewing the application. So keep that in mind when it comes to your own processes, because admissions and recruitment is one. I was an admissions counselor, enrollment counselor. That is the same person as the recruitment officer.
Yeah, and I want to add something else as well because I think that traditionally speaking, the US isn't really seen as that high volume market that other markets are across the globe when you're working in recruitment. But the thing with transfer students is that there are millions of them with very few international options. So this can be a high volume market for you if you're reducing these friction points. And what Emma and I have seen in just the first 6 months of going live for students is that we have over 500 students who have started applications. And 1 in 2 students often will only submit 2 applications. So there's a very high intent with these students, and the potential is huge if you're able to remove those barriers and take away some of those friction points. This could be a high volume market within an otherwise saturated market in the typical high school recruitment landscape.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ashley. We've got a question in, which I also get commonly asked, which is, are there specific subject areas that are more popular with these students? And also, do you find interest in arts and humanities?
What our data has been showing, which hopefully I can't see because I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully, we have some partners in the room and future partners, but you will have access to these students and you'll see that they're across the board. What we've seen the most, what we're most excited about is that those over 500 started applications are coming from every major. We have everything from law and medicine and more STEM focused fields to the arts and humanities to the digital media, very unique programs. Because remember, the community colleges offer really, really niche programs at the end of the day as well. So Ashley, do you have anything to add to that in terms of program? I mean, we have a lot of psychology
No.
students.
I think psychology has been popular, but again, it's just across the board. And I think that we're only going to get more data from here, but it's been amazing to see that there is not one particular subject. So this isn't just an opportunity for arts and humanities or just an opportunity for engineering. There's kind of room for anybody from the faculties to kind of enter into this space. So we're really looking forward to seeing if that spread does start to kind of show some peaks in different interest areas. But right now, it's so broad and it's really exciting to see that.
And I think
Which
that's
means
a,
if your faculty, go ahead.
no, you
Sorry.
go, Emma.
No, I was going to say, which means if your one or two of your faculties is open, then there's some students for you. You know
Start
what I
there.
mean? So if it's only, your marine department that's actually open to this, then maybe that's fine, because you're gonna have students in all fields.
Yeah, and I think I'm thinking more from a UK university lens. We see large cohorts from certain other regions going into predominantly business schools or going into particular computer science, AI courses. And so it's really lovely to hear that these profile of students means you have a lot of breadth and diversity across subject areas. I'm sure many people listening on the webinar today that will be a welcome piece of information to have shared. So thank you. I'm conscious we've only got a few minutes left, so I can't see any further questions on the chat. Any questions, Katie, Ashley, or Emma, that you wanted, or any other points that you wanted to raise or ask one another? Feel free. If not, we can close the session there.
I think really the thing that comes to my mind is just kind of looking to the future. I think that this is an exciting time to pioneer in this space and to really look at transfer right now because it's not going away and it's going to be a competitive market for international universities very soon. And some universities are offering transfer where it's 2+1 or 2+2. And meeting the market needs is going to get you in early so that you can really connect with transfer applications.
And just a big shout out to Kate and Katie from our side of
Yeah.
things. Just not to be cheesy, but these two really know the market, support these initiatives, and are finger to the pulse. So thank you.
Oh,
Yeah. Thank you
thank you very
guys.
much. No, we want to see more American students coming and studying in on foreign campuses all over the world. That's what we really want to see. And so working with you and the work that you're doing has been a really great way to showcase this to many universities. So thank you all for presenting today. Katie has put into the chat the link to the report, also information about how to get in touch with us, but also we'll be sending out the recording of this. So hopefully you can go and speak to colleagues within the university and convince them that the transfer process would be something that potentially your university will be open to. But any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. We're always happy to answer any questions you might have. But thank you so much for spending the last hour with us. We really appreciate it. And have a good, wonderful rest of your day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thanks,
Emma,
everyone.
Ashley.
Thanks,
Thank
Bye.
you.
everyone.
Thank you, Kate and Katie. Bye, everybody.